Taka carefully lifted the strange deer onto his back, filled with hope because this would be the first time he had fresh meat to eat after many days of starvation. But as soon as he returned home, a giant wild boar suddenly rushed out from the bushes. Taka was forced to throw away his precious prey to save his life. Living in the dangerous land called Demon Zone is clearly more difficult than he thought. A few days ago, Taka discovered that the land he was aiming for had been bought by a third party. Saving for 3 years to accumulate 5 gold coins now becomes meaningless. He asked the broker if there was any other land suitable for his small amount of money. But this question is not easy to answer, because with 5 gold coins, the options are very limited. Taka doesn't care what type of land it is, as long as there is land to build a house. The broker mentioned a piece of land that fit his criteria, but warned that he might not like it. That land is spacious but surrounded by wild mountains, cliffs and seas with no way out. With nothing left to lose, Taka decided to accept. Anyway, he has never been good at anything. When he was just 15 years old, his parents kicked him out of the house because of his uselessness. With nowhere else to go, Taka chooses to become an adventurer just because he thinks the job is cool. However, reality is much harsher than imagined. Most adventurers have no significant talent, and only a very few possess actual fighting ability. Therefore, Taka was assigned to a group that specialized in picking herbs. But the money from selling herbs was immediately spent on bad habits like gambling as a woman. His financial situation became worse and worse. It was at this moment that an idea flashed in his mind. As an adventurer, he was almost useless. But with his roots as a farmer's son, he realized he could rebuild his life by becoming independent. With this wild, unexplored land, Taka decided to live by farming here. On his way to his new land, he was stopped by 2 guards from the Kingdom of Estonia. When they learned that he had just purchased the area known as the Demon Region, they looked at him suspiciously and asked to check his adventurer card. The adventurer card clearly states each person's name and rank. Sadly, Taka's ranking never changed at the lowest level. Taka, after leaving, the guard jokingly advised him to improve his survival skills. Enter the Demon Zone with the determination to start anew. Not long after, he encountered a terrifying scene. A wild bear was fighting a giant Vespa wasp in a battle for territory. Taka knew that he was not strong enough to confront either side. The bear quickly tore apart the Vespa bee, then continued hunting. Taka carefully crawled out of his hiding place, taking the opportunity to collect the body of the Vespa bee. He was lucky to get its eyes, feathers and magic stone. Each monster possesses its own magic stone with unique properties, which serves as a fuel source that allows them to use magic and special abilities. As for humans, they rely on magic drawn from nature. The magic stone from the Vespa bee is rumored to have the ability to create toxins, but Taka could not find its venom. He followed the bear's trail and, as expected, discovered the venom embedded in the animal's body. Taka skinned the bear, got the meat, fur and magic stone. A lucky and promising start helps him confidently move forward. After 3 days of continuous marching, Taka finally reaches his land. He waded across the river, but suddenly his foot got stuck on something sticky. He kicked his foot hard, revealing a slime hidden under the water. Taka prepared to fight with his pickaxe, but immediately felt dizzy. Apparently the slime had drained his mana. He tried to aim at its core, but not only missed, but the pickaxe was melted by the slime's acid. Having no other choice, Taka used bear fur to cover the slime for defense, then recklessly stabbed randomly with his small knife. Luckily, he hit the core, causing the slime to deflate, but not in time to avoid the water it sprayed into his face. Unfortunately, the bear skin was completely destroyed, but in return, Taka obtained the slime's magic stone. He continued moving forward, urgently looking for a place to set up camp before night fell. Taka began surveying the area to find suitable wood to make a tent. Discovered strange things that he had never seen before, such as palm leaves, snaptrap tree, and butterbur tree. Taka walks into a bright flower field, but immediately realizes something is wrong when he sees animal carcasses scattered everywhere. His instinct told him there was danger, so he immediately turned around and left that area. Taka then built a makeshift tent using wood and palm leaves. The only consolation was that he still had some guinea bear meat to eat. However, Taka knows that if he wants to survive in this land, he must improve his survival skills. But the day wasn't over yet. A ferocious blue tiger, attracted by the smell of bear meat, appeared near his camp. Taka realizes that encountering this creature almost means death. Quickly thinking, he injected venom from the Vespa hornet's needle into the bear meat and threw it at the tiger. However, the tiger is not interested in cooked meat, it wants fresh meat. Taka was forced to run away, rushing through the dense forest, causing the ferns to secrete slippery mucus. Just as the tiger was about to grab him, It slipped on the mucus, giving Taka a chance to escape. By the time the tiger recovered, Taka had run a safe distance. He sat panting under the tree. I feel like today is really a disastrous day. The sound of rustling leaves nearby reminded him that the danger was not yet over. He thought if he continued like this, he probably wouldn't survive until morning. When considering running away, he realized that it didn't improve his chances of survival at all. Taka decided to stand firm and force himself to survive in this new land. He found the blue tiger again and lured it with raw meat to the deadly flower field he had discovered before. When the tiger realized where he was, it was too late. Taka knew that if this plan failed, it would be all over for him. The tiger saw him and rushed up, jumping towards him with terrifying speed. But in mid-air, it suddenly fell down, rolling harmlessly into the middle of the flower field. Just as Taka predicted, those flowers contained a powerful sleep-inducing substance. Taka quickly covered his face to avoid being affected by the sleeping substance, then used an axe to harvest the tiger's head. Taka tried to grill tiger meat, but its strange green color and unusual texture made it impossible for him to eat. Finally, he gave up and lay down, longing for a real meal. Even though this forest was challenging, he decided to try a little more. This is a harsh place, but it's where you belong. In his sleep, Taka saw an image of a crowded shopping center in Japan, then a small computer screen appeared. He suddenly woke up, feeling strange because it was a dream about a world he had definitely never seen. Similar dreams had appeared when he was young, but he still couldn't understand their meaning. Suddenly, he noticed a slime dissolving inside his bag. He immediately pulled out the axe and quickly destroyed its core with a single slash. Luckily, his bag was still safe. Taka put his bag on his back and continued to explore the forest. Because this was the land he owned, he wanted to understand it better. While walking, he discovered the body of a lamia. But the stench and buzzing of the flies showed that it had been dead for a long time. Taka wonders what killed this creature. When he looked closely into the lamia's mouth, he discovered a Vespa hornet's stinger. Consider it another stroke of luck. He continued to dissect lamia's body and harvested its magic stone. As Taka continued to survey the area, he came across some mushrooms growing under a tree. He thought about eating them but quickly realized that any plant in this area was too dangerous to consume. To test, he grabbed a small wild mouse that was running by and threw it towards the mushroom. When the mouse touched it, the mushrooms immediately ejected a dense cloud containing spores that caused paralysis. Makes the mouse unable to move. Taka confirmed his suspicions. Even the mushrooms here are extremely dangerous. However, this gave him an idea: to use them as traps. Taka began digging frantically, realizing that traps were the only way for him to survive against the powerful and ferocious monsters in this forest. He carefully collected the sleeping suman flowers and paralysis mushrooms and dropped them into the trap hole. Once finished, Taka returned to the tent and fell asleep, ravenous. The next morning, he got up to check his trap. He was surprised to discover that a giant wild boar had fallen into a trap. The animal is unconscious thanks to the deadly combination of suman flowers and paralysis mushroom spores. Taka killed the wild boar while it was still sleeping and cut open its stomach, discovering a green snake and a bear inside its stomach. He spent the whole day butchering the pig, obtaining its fangs, fur, meat, and magic stone. Taka skewered meat on a grill and enjoyed his first real meal after many days of starvation. While eating, he realized that the tools he brought were worn out. Taka decided to use pig bones as raw materials to make weapons. Then, he used clay and resin to create a mold, producing a sturdy axe. Taka was so engrossed in his work that he didn't realize it was morning. After setting another trap, he realized the job was completed faster than usual. Taka begins to wonder if he is getting stronger, and if so, what the cause might be. Either way, he felt like he was stronger now, even though he couldn't get there before. The next day, while traveling through rough terrain, Taka discovered a cave. When he entered, he saw a wall, a torch, and other signs that someone had once lived here. However, the cave had long been abandoned. Taka continued to explore this strange place and accidentally discovered an old skeleton clutching a book in his skinny fingers. Taka carefully removed the skeleton's hand and retrieved the diary of a man with the initials PJ. The diary contains information on how to survive in this dangerous forest. As he flipped through the pages, Taka found a note about the Guardian of Ruins, a creature said to be immune to all types of attacks. According to the diary, this creature appears in the ruins every 3 months, and to have a chance of defeating it, it is necessary to master space and time magic. Clearly, PJ has researched the area extensively, but the end of the diary reveals that he was unable to decipher the mystery behind the land. Taka decides to collect PJ's bones and bury them outside as a form of gratitude. Upon examining the house, Taka realized it was filled with strange weapons and armor. He wondered how someone as talented as PJ had to die. Still, Taka decided not to find out more. What's more important is that he found a suitable place to live. Without hesitation, he quickly packed his things and moved in there. Taka is eager to make his new home a place worth living. He cleaned up everything he could and salvaged everything that still had value. Finally restore the house to a stable operating state. Taka officially moved into the new house. Even though there was no one to welcome him, he didn't care much. Solitude suited him perfectly. Meanwhile, two soldiers are fighting a bear to keep it from reaching the main road. Taka jumped down from a nearby tree and offered to help. At first, the two guards thought he was just an unarmed civilian, but Taka quickly asserted that they were not capable of confronting this wild bear alone. Calmly facing the bear, Taka dodged the powerful claw swings and aimed for softer spots on the bear's body. With a precise slash, Taka severed the bear's throat, ending the battle in the blink of an eye. After taking down the bear, Taka asked the two guards if they were from the nearby training station. "And could you trade for some seeds?" The two guards, still amazed by the performance just now, told him that he could go directly to the trading facility to exchange. Taka, full of excitement, quickly set off. After returning from the trading facility, Taka brought back some seeds, charcoal, and rough paper. It had been a few weeks since he had set foot in this cursed land, and he was starting to get used to life here. However, to avoid getting lost in this vast area, Taka knew he needed to make a map. Thinking back to the soldier's surprised eyes when he saw his strength, Taka wondered when he became so strong. Perhaps it was due to being forced to survive in such a harsh and uninhabitable environment. Looking at his reflection in the water, Taka realized that he had not bathed properly for a long time. Deciding not to let himself become any more slovenly, he bathed in the river and shaved off his shaggy beard. As soon as he returned to farming, Taka suddenly lost his balance and fell over. In front of him was a giant turtle slowly moving towards his farm. Taka tried to scare it away by hitting it with a pickaxe, but the turtle easily sent him flying into a puddle of mud. Taka angrily stood up, remembering that he had just finished bathing, and angrily moved forward to attack the turtle again. The turtle tried to defend itself, but its foot got stuck in the swamp, causing it to fall onto its back and splashing Taka with water. In a helpless state, the turtle was turned into delicious turtle soup by Taka. While enjoying the meal, Taka noticed that in PJ's notebook there was an entry about a turtle. He learns that this turtle is called the haze turtle, considered a weak but peaceful species. However, Taka did not feel guilty about killing it. Taka's next plan is to explore the nearby coastal area. He had collected a lot of meat but not enough salt to preserve it. With the goal of finding salt, Taka set out for the coast, while continuing to map the surrounding area. Finally, Taka reached the sea. While concentrating on getting salt from seawater, he noticed something more valuable than salt: a woman lying unconscious on the sand. Initially, Taka intended to ignore it and focus on his work, but then he realized that he would need to prepare to defend his territory against future invaders. While continuing to filter salt from seawater, Taka finally decided to help the woman. He avoided a dinosaur while collecting medicinal herbs, then returned to the beach. Taka crushed the herbs into a smooth medicinal liquid and gave it to the woman to drink. As the sun set, he turned his attention to finding food, and caught a giza crab to grill over an open fire. The woman he helped earlier gradually regained consciousness, but her eyes were fixed on the crab that Taka was holding. He offered her a piece, and she nodded enthusiastically. The woman passionately smoked crab meat, while Taka explains that this is his territory. However, she did not understand his language, and instead calls him Makio. Makio decided not to change her name because she found it quite annoying. The woman introduced herself as Cheru. Cheru shook the remaining crab's leg to demand more food, but Makio told her that there were no more crabs left. Hearing that, Cheru looked sad. Makio asked her how she was here, and Cheru started retelling the story by drawing in the sand. Looking at her drawings, Makio deduced that she had fled from some conflict between the demon clan. Cheru showed interest in what Makio was boiling. When he explained that he was making salt, Cheru used magic to strengthen the fire. Makio quickly used gestures and intuition to tell her to lower the temperature. Thereby, he realized that Cheru was volunteering to look after the fire for him. Makio accepted the offer, but internally began to wonder if she could ask her to teach him magic as a way to pay rent. The next morning, Makio woke up to find Cheru clinging to her back like a sloth. When he checked the pan, he found it full of salt and realized that if he had help, he could get more done. Makio asked Cheru to follow him back home, even though in his heart he thought that in the long run, he would find a way to bring her back to where she came from. Cheru followed Makio home. During the trip, Makio noticed she didn't have much stamina or fighting skills. Reminds me of myself before. When she finally arrived, Cheru was amazed by the house, which she considered very civilized. She excitedly shouted, "I'm home, I'm home!" with childlike excitement. Makio took her on a tour of the house, showing her how to use the objects. But in the end, Cheru fell asleep again. Makio doesn't blame her, because she had had a long day. He brought her home only because he thought she could be useful, but the truth was that she was becoming a burden. Makio understands that if he is discovered to be hiding a demon in his house, he will be arrested. Makio looked at Cheru, deciding that it was better to take her back to her homeland now, instead of continuing to be insecure. However, when he reached out to wake her, he heard Cheru softly calling his name in his sleep. Makio slowly backed away thinking. He realized that both he and Cheru were in the same situation, both lost, alone, and with nowhere to return. Makio gently covered Cheru with a blanket and decided to live peacefully with her from that day. The next day, Cheru joins Makio on a new expedition, but she is quickly exhausted and unable to deal with most of the creatures in the forest. Cheru's slowness severely limits Makio's ability to explore. Determined to change the situation, Makio decides to train her. He assigned Cheru the task of catching as many forest rats as possible. All morning, Cheru struggled to chase the rats. But the only achievement she achieved was a single rat tail. Makio continues to train Cheru in combat, but things are not easy. When Cheru closed her eyes and unleashed fireballs, she completely missed her target, a big-nosed monkey. Makio reminded her to open her eyes and focused on the target, but because she was too nervous, Cheru still couldn't aim. Instead, she released such a large amount of fireballs that she ended up accidentally hitting the monkey. Cheru was happily proud of her achievement, while Makio felt extremely frustrated for some reason. He carried her home, worried when he realized that the entire afternoon would only be enough for them to deal with one emerald monkey. That night, Makio leads Cheru to a campsite for the night. He asked her to teach him magic, something Cheru seemed very excited about. She touched Makio's palm, pouring her magic into him. Makio felt a pleasant warmth spread through her fingers, a strange and new feeling. However, suddenly Cheru frowned and scolded Makio for something he didn't understand, then she hit a giant rafflesia flower nearby. By drawing on the ground, Cheru explains that Makio possesses a large reserve of magical energy. Makio guessed that his magical power had increased along with his natural power without him realizing it, as he rarely used magic in combat. He only knew a little about basic light magic, but all he could do was create a small beam of light. Cheru explains that magic depends on visualization, but this is easier said than done. Makio tried to imagine a fire in his hand, and after a few minutes, he also created a small fire. However, he did not like the fact that it took so long to create, because it was not suitable for use in combat. The next morning, Makio decided to hunt as many monsters as possible for practice before returning. He announced that they would take the cliff road home, but Cheru appeared worried. Makio suggests she use wind magic to fly. If not, she will have to climb it herself. While Makio was about to climb the cliff, he heard Cheru shouting his name. When he turned around, he saw her being chased by a giant butterfly. Makio sees this as an opportunity for her to practice, so he guides her in combat. Cheru turned around, preparing to throw fireballs. But the butterfly dropped a layer of paralyzing dust, making it impossible for her to move. Makio was forced to intervene when she saw Cheru in danger. He quickly grabbed a sharp branch and threw it straight at the giant butterfly, successfully knocking it down. He ran to Cheru to check if she was okay. Cheru weakly pointed towards the magic stone from the butterfly and vaguely motioned for him to attach it to a tree branch. Makio followed the instructions, creating a staff capable of causing paralysis. Cheru picked up the staff, and miraculously, the paralysis from her body immediately disappeared. With her new weapon in hand, Cheru had no problem confronting the Vespa Hornets. Her paralysis and fireball combo skills quickly destroy any monster. Cheru was glad that she had finally gotten into the groove of monster hunting. Over the next few days, Makio and Cheru continue to hunt for monsters. By using this simple but extremely effective combination move, Makio was very pleased with their progress. They surveyed the area comprehensively and both of their mobility became more and more flexible. During a hunting trip, Cheru alerts Makio to the presence of a group of imps gathered around a nearby tree for their weekly book club. Cheru wanted to attack, but Makio told her to ignore the trolls because they were too numerous. However, Cheru ignored the order and used a paralysis spell on the entire group of trolls. When the imps fell to the ground, the tree they were sitting on suddenly woke up. Turns out, it was no ordinary tree, but an ancient tree. Its roots stretched out and dug up the whole ground. Cheru instinctively threw a fireball at it. Even though the attack was effective, the tree remained unfazed. Makio quickly pulled Cheru away, because he knew this was not an opponent they could defeat. The ancient tree chased them, its giant roots trying to grab them both. Each time, they almost caught them. Cheru closed her eyes and muttered nonsense, while Makio tried her best to dodge the increasingly aggressive roots. Makio pushes herself to the limit, determined to run just one step further. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a vague memory from his previous life. Right after that, Makio suddenly gained extraordinary strength, jumping over a cliff. Only when his feet hit the ground did he realize what he had just done. The strong momentum of the jump caused him to fall a few times before stopping. They both turned to look at the giant old tree, seeing him turn away angrily, clearly disappointed. Makio asked Cheru if she would use magic to help him jump over the cliff, but Cheru shook her head and pointed at him. This makes Makio wonder if the mysterious sign he saw in his memories is related to what just happened. Cheru then used healing magic to heal some of Makio's wounds. He took the opportunity to ask her how to use healing magic, but Cheru simply explained that it must be felt. Makio didn't understand her explanation at all. During the test, Makio coated his dagger with magical fire, but he overdid it, causing it to become so hot that it could no longer be held. He put down the knife, realizing that turning a weapon made from coconut sap into a magic sword was not a very feasible idea. Since his encounter with the ancient tree, Makio had created many other weapons, but none had felt like the strange power he felt that day. When Cheru came to call him for lunch, Makio coated his fist with magic and punched the ground, causing the ground to crack. Cheru immediately started rambling about something, but once again, Makio had absolutely no idea what she was saying. Makio thinks she has discovered something wonderful about magic. He followed Cheru home, but when he saw that the lunch she prepared only consisted of a few pieces of raw meat and a few wild fruits, he shook his head sadly. This is clearly inedible. Makio tells Cheru to watch as he starts making bread from scratch. When Cheru tasted the unfamiliar food, she enjoyed it so much that she ate it deliciously. Makio felt happy that she liked it, but he knew that in the end, he still had to find a way to bring her back home, even though she helped a lot with the farming. Makio takes Cheru out to cut down trees, with the intention of using the wood to build a boat for her. He used an axe made from coconut sap to cut down trees, but the process was incredibly slow and laborious. He thought angrily that it would be much faster if he had a real weapon, and suddenly remembered that he did. Makio returned to the cave and took out one of PJ's old weapons. He cast wind magic on the axe blade, turning it into a powerful tool. With just one slash, he was able to cut down not just one, not two, but dozens of large trees. This far exceeded all of Makio's expectations. He wondered if these weapons were too sensitive to magic. However, he decided that this sword was too dangerous to use. In the end, Makio and Cheru collected a large amount of wood enough to build a small boat. However, Makio noticed that the wood was still damp, so he could not start building the boat right away. He decided to spend the rest of his time practicing how to channel magic, while Cheru enthusiastically announced that she was going hunting. As the sun gradually set, Makio realized how quickly time passed. Cheru returned with some bread she had baked herself, and the two shared around the blazing campfire. Life is simple, but Makio finds it very comfortable and worth enjoying. The next morning, Makio felt a cold wind brushing against her face. When he opened his eyes, he realized he and Cheru were hundreds of meters in the air. A flock of wyverns captured the two while they slept. They were too high up for any viable escape plan. Cheru woke up and panicked, starting to launch fireballs at the wyverns. Makio decides to follow Cheru's strategy. He pulled a small knife from his pocket and stabbed the wyvern's claw, forcing it to release him. However, he fell right into the flight path of another wyvern. Without hesitation, Makio infused earth magic into her hand and punched the wyvern in the jaw, shattering it. He then jumped onto the wyvern's back, ran to its head, and delivered another powerful punch. The wyvern lost control and plummeted to the ground. Just before hitting the ground, Makio covered her feet with wind magic and jumped off the dragon's back, landing safely. Makio quickly checked on Cheru and discovered she had chosen a different approach. She covered both herself and the wyvern with water magic. This could have been a perfect plan if Cheru remembered that she couldn't breathe underwater. Makio pulled her away from the wyvern and performed CPR to save her. As she looked up into the distance, Makio noticed the sun was setting, and they were in a strange land, without any luggage. The situation worsened when a bright sunset shone down on the area, forcing them to take shelter in a nearby cave. But things get even worse when Cheru suddenly falls ill, and Makio realizes that in this wasteland, medicine is a luxury. He checks PJ's diary for useful information and discovers that the imp's magic stone can cure colds. With no other choice, Makio decided to return to the swamp to find them. But he couldn't take Cheru with him in his current state. Makio shielded Cheru with a wyvern wing like a protective dome, then infused magic into his feet and ran straight to the swamp. Here, he quickly found a small group of imps and easily defeated them. Collect some magic stones. But he almost forgot an important detail. These imps were protected by a giant old tree. The ancient tree shook and attacked Makio with powerful roots. No time and no patience. Makio infused stone and fire magic into her body, then slashed through the tree as if it were just paper. In fact, it is indeed made from wood. Meanwhile, Cheru lay huddled together, shivering from the cold even in the sweltering heat of the desert. Makio, covered in injuries, finally returned with Imp's magic stones. And immediately gave them to Cheru. Cheru consumed the magic stone, and a black smoke filled with miasma escaped, seemingly as if her illness had manifested itself. Cheru quickly returned to her cheerful state, making Makio happy that she had recovered. The two then begin the long journey back home, with Cheru following Makio closer than ever. Meanwhile, a group of adventurers appears at the border of the demon land that Makio manages. As Makio was preparing for another day of farming, Cheru informed him that there was a stranger intruding. Makio and Cheru quietly watched from afar. The expedition team includes strange characters such as Gandalf the Grey, Chun-Li, Joan of Arc, John Ice and several other supporting characters entering the forest. Makio noticed how they struggled against the most basic slimes, not to mention giant green snakes. Cheru even yawned because everything felt like a bland comedy. Makio realized that the group was exhausted after just a few small battles, and many of them had run out of magic. Makio decided to approach the expedition group as the landowner of this area. He asked what they were doing here. The group's leader declares them to be the group White Lightning. Makio sternly informed them that they were trespassing on private property and advised them to leave immediately. The leader looked uncomfortable, feeling slighted by Makio. However, Makio was only concerned about their safety. If they are still struggling to defeat the slime, it is better to leave the area immediately. Suddenly, a giant dragon frog passed by, causing the entire White Lightning group to run away in fear. But Cheru noticed that they had left behind something that looked important. The group's healing mage, Cleric, who was currently unconscious. Makio sighed, realizing that this was going to be a bigger problem than he thought. He decided to bring the magician back to his cave. As he was preparing to go to a nearby station to exchange goods, he thought he should also take this woman with him. Cheru is excited for the trip, but Makio warns her to hide her horns to avoid causing trouble. After tying the healing mage up with the goods, Makio and Cheru arrived at the trading post. Upon arriving, Makio was greeted by his usual customers. This person quickly realized that this time Makio had an additional guest with him. While negotiating the usual deals, Makio asked them to take care of the healing mage he had saved from the demon land. The merchant was especially interested in one of the swords that Makio made. Wields the blue tiger's fangs, along with homemade staffs studded with magical stones. Believing these were valuable products, Makio asked for metal weapons, crafting tools, and some women's clothing in exchange. In addition, he also wanted a magic book about space-time. However, the head of the trading post doubted that such a book existed, and if it did, its price would be extremely expensive. He also warned Makio that there were a lot of fake products on the market, and if he wanted to ensure quality, he'd better go to the big city to see for himself. Makio thanks him for his advice. The next morning, Makio decides to spend the day searching for the ruins that PJ mentioned in his diary. However, the exact location of the ruins is not clearly stated there. Makio looked at the map he had drawn of the demon lands and concluded that the best chance of finding the ruins was to head south. After weaving through giant centipedes and chopper monsters, Makio and Cheru suddenly got lost in a desert, even though before they had only walked through the woods. Before them lay vast sand dunes under scorching heat, but that was only what Makio could see on the surface. Suddenly, a giant sandroom emerged from the ground, shook the whole area. Makio quickly turns over PJ's diary and discovers information about this creature. Surprisingly, it was just one of the weakest monsters in the region. Makio couldn't understand how such a giant creature could be considered weak. He and Cheru fled in panic, but did not get far before being chased by the creature. Forced to fight back, Makio used her magic-infused sword to slash down on the monster. But the wound he caused was just a small cut, insignificant. Makio and Cheru ran back toward the forest, where they could finally catch their breath after the chase. While still confused, Makio wondered why such a terrible creature was considered weak. He turned back to PJ's diary to study further, and discovered a weapon that he had overlooked for a long time. He draws a magic circle that he copied from PJ's diary, but when he infuses it with magic, the circle explodes. He tried again and succeeded in creating a strange type of space-time magic. Upon closer inspection, Makio realized that these magic circles appeared everywhere in PJ's items. This only makes the mystery of PJ even deeper. There is no doubt that PJ is a very talented and strong person. But why did he die quietly in a wild forest? Makio couldn't understand. The next day, Makio decided to return to the desert for a rematch. But before leaving, he stopped by the river to get more water. At that moment, Cheru lightly touched his shoulder and pointed into the distance. The woman he had saved the day before was standing there. Makio asked her what she wanted, and she introduced herself as Jennifer Valkov, announcing that she had left White Lightning. Jennifer wants to join Makio's group. However, Makio immediately refused, claiming that he already had the necessary manpower. Jennifer proudly declared that she could use many types of healing magic and was also in charge of managing the supplies for her old group. Despite this, Makio continues to reject Jennifer, but she reveals that she is from the north and is increasingly desperate to join his group. Makio quickly realized that Jennifer did not leave the White Lightning group on her own, but was actually kicked out. Jennifer denied it, but the truth was clear on her face. Makio emphasizes that this is his territory, and without knowing the real reason she wants to stay, he cannot let her continue to stay here. Jennifer admitted that her team thought she was no longer useful. However, Makio doesn't see what this has to do with him, and advised her to go somewhere else. Any place would be better than this dangerous land. Jennifer ignores Makio's advice and declares that this land is her promised land, where she will no longer be betrayed by anyone. Makio is angry, but in the end he agrees to let her stay on 2 conditions. She must pay the rent and not panic every time she encounters any monster. While Jennifer had no difficulty with the first condition, the second condition is still a big challenge for Jennifer. And Makio realizes that putting herself in danger could make things complicated. He decided to let her stay a little longer before trying to take her away. Suddenly, Jennifer rushed into the room, warning that there was a demon here. Cheru calmly walked in with a plate of bread in hand. Makio calmly took a piece of cake and went out to the fields, completely ignoring Jennifer's panic. Jennifer quickly chased after her, trying to convince Makio that Cheru was dangerous. But in Makio's eyes, Cheru may be stupid, but she is a good person. Jennifer still considers Cheru an enemy and warns that if the guards find out about this, they will take Cheru away. Makio raised an eyebrow, reminding that the war ended 100 years ago and Cheru was not the enemy. To demonstrate, Makio demonstrates the magic that Cheru recently taught him as part of the rent. He told Jennifer that if she didn't pay, she couldn't stay here. Jennifer proudly announced that she would pay him 10 gold coins every month. Makio tried to act calm, but inside he couldn't help but be surprised. This was the most money he had ever had in his life. Jennifer gave him a check for 10 gold coins. Makio is not satisfied. Jennifer explained that in the capital, checks are very common, you just need to bring them to a money exchange to get gold. However, Makio reminds her that this is not the capital and the money exchange does not visit this area. At this point, Jennifer was willing to do anything to stay. She hopes the harsh environment here will help her become stronger. To take revenge on the White Lightning group, Makio was a little annoyed by her vengeful target, and decided that he could not in good conscience allow her to stay any longer. He bluntly told her to leave. Jennifer nervously asked if she said anything offensive. Makio replied that he understood why she was kicked out of the group. She refused to listen to other people's opinions. It's easy to get angry when things don't go your way, and in the Demon Land, things rarely go as expected. Even though most of the good things that happened to Makio were due to pure luck, he still made that decision. Jennifer angrily packed her things and left. Makio believes she did the right thing. In this dangerous land, there is no place for those with hatred. The next day, Makio and Cheru prepare to return to the desert. He brought everything necessary to ensure a successful trip. Includes a leaf bird and a guide bird with excellent navigation abilities to guide them back. However, just as Makio was about to leave, Cheru cried out, pointing to a body lying nearby. Makio discovered Jennifer lying motionless on the rocks, but she was still alive, even though her breathing was weak. Reluctantly, Makio takes her home, but he doesn't want the trip to be delayed any longer. After a little care, he decided to let Jennifer rest, while he still left for the desert. Once in the desert, Makio and Cheru once again encounter the giant sandworm they encountered before. But this time, Makio was ready. He clasped PJ's sword in his hand, applying the principles from the magic circle PJ had left behind. With wind magic, he tore apart the giant sandworm, finally understood why PJ considered it just one of the weaker creatures. According to records in the diary, most monsters in this desert area are actually not strong, but PJ emphasized being especially careful with poisonous plants. Even so, Makio did not notice any trees around. He continued his journey. The two continued moving forward, overcoming harsh sand dunes under the harsh sun. Finally, they noticed something flying in the sky. At first, Cheru thought it was just a bird, but upon closer inspection, Makio realized it was a chain of floating islands, held together by chains connected to the ground. He was certain this was the ruin PJ had described in the diary. Excited, Makio rushed towards the ruins, noting the strange texture of the chains. As he began to climb, he quickly realized that the task was more difficult than he thought. Makio thought she was strong enough, but climbing a chain this long was not an easy challenge. Cheru tries to use magic to make climbing easier, but the magic backfires. It seems these chains are made from special metal, capable of absorbing magic. Makio wondered who made them, but now he focused on climbing. The road was long and dangerous, but after what seemed like endless hours, Makio and Cheru finally reached the top. They set foot on the floating island, which contained a ruined town covered with overgrown weeds. The two quickly explored the island and found much evidence that a civilization once thrived here. However, there were no bones or signs of any conflict. Everything seemed to mysteriously disappear, as if the inhabitants of the place had vanished into thin air. While searching, Makio and Cheru discovered a grave site, and on one of the tombstones, there was an inscription stating that Peter Jefferson rested here. Cheru immediately recognized that this was the name PJ mentioned in the diary. But if Peter Jefferson really lies under this tombstone, then who is the skeleton in the cave? Makio had no answer. With the falling sunset, he set up camp for the night. But the mystery of the ruins makes Makio even more worried, but the cold night is the immediate concern. Unable to bear the cold, he asked Cheru if they could hug each other to keep warm. Cheru happily agreed, and the two of them passed through the cold night. Finding nothing of value at the ruins, Makio and Cheru decided to return home using the bird as their guide. Makio was covered in sand, uncomfortable and stuck everywhere. Returning, he and Cheru temporarily ate some bread to gain strength. But something feels wrong. He quickly discovered that Jennifer was still here, her body still seriously injured. Cheru immediately used healing magic to help her. Makio sighed and asked her why she was still here. Jennifer explains that she tried to leave, but the monsters in the forest relentlessly pursued her, forcing her to run back to this place. She had used up all her magic to heal herself, so she had no choice but to stay. Makio was too tired to argue with Jennifer at the moment. He told her to rest, but also reminded her that this time she had to do some housework to make up for the food she had consumed. The next morning, Makio noticed that Jennifer had faithfully kept the kitchen fire burning all night. Jennifer laments that since arriving in the demon land, she hasn't been able to do anything real and can't even leave this place. Makio scratched her head, handing her the anesthesia staff to help her leave. Jennifer extended her hand to receive it, but suddenly withdrew it, then knelt down and begged Makio to let her stay. She promises to pay the rent and admits that she is very weak. If she left now, she knew that nothing would change in her life. Makio raised her eyebrows, asking if she really wanted to change. Jennifer confessed that her parents abandoned her when she was young. She was then kicked out of the church, became an adventurer, and then was expelled from the group again. She admitted that her claim of wanting revenge was just an excuse. The truth is that no one needs her, and no one wants her. All this time, she refused to look directly at her own weaknesses. Makio asked Jennifer why she wanted to live here. Jennifer replied that her goals were him and Cheru. She admired how they lived freely in the demon land without depending on anyone. That made her feel impressed. Jennifer begged him to teach her how to live as an explorer. Makio calmly replied that he was not an explorer, he was just trying to explore his backyard. He told her she could do whatever she wanted, but she had to do it alone. Jennifer agreed and asked Cheru to teach her how to bake bread. Very quickly, she got used to the house, choosing a small corner as her bed. Makio's house is now a little busier. Jennifer gives Makio her first rent payment, an ancient gold coin she found from a zombie. The only monster she can destroy. And so Jennifer joins Makio's quirky little family. One evening, Jennifer curiously asked what Makio was doing. He explains that he's making something to trade at a nearby outpost, but he doesn't think it's worth much. However, Jennifer did not agree. She points out that an anesthetic staff is an extremely powerful tool, especially useful for adventurers, and its value is no small thing. Hearing that, Makio felt a little happy knowing that what she made was appreciated. As Makio and Cheru prepare to depart for the outpost, Jennifer stands to see them off. Cheru curiously asked about Jennifer's plans, and Makio explained that Jennifer was still lost so she would stay home. Cheru comments that Jennifer is exactly the same as she was at first. Upon arriving at the outpost, the captain informed Makio that his anesthesia staff was very popular, and they had received many new orders. He also gave Makio a magic book, although not about space-time magic as he expected. It was just a basic magic book, but still contained useful effects and magic circles for him to better understand the system. Makio left the outpost with some boat-building tools and extra clothes for the women. When he returned home, he began studying the magic rings on Peter's swords and tried to systematically classify them. However, most of the magic rings on Peter's other devices remained unrecognizable. Jennifer poked her head into the room, noticed that Makio was doing nothing but reading a book, and asked why he wasn't out hunting monsters. He replied that if she wanted to hunt, she should go ahead and do it herself, because they were both explorers but on different journeys. Jennifer understood and left the room. Before leaving, she thanked Makio for buying her clothes. Makio only replied that he bought it for convenience, not for any special reason. Without any of them realizing, a new character had set foot in the demon land. That afternoon, Cheru returned home covered in the blood of a haze turtle. She gives Makio a strange donut covered in lightning symbols. Makio immediately recognized this as a human-made item, even though nothing happened when he tried to use magic on it. However, he quickly realized that the patterns on the cake were similar to the drawings in Peter's diary. Makio asked Cheru where she found it, and she explained that it was in the swamp. She added that she tried to teach Jennifer how to swim, even though Jennifer almost drowned. Makio wants to investigate the swamp because of the possibility of ruins there. He dove into the water, his arms covered in light magic, determined to explore the depths of these dark waters. Immediately, he faced a giant man-eating fish. Not wanting to waste time with this monster, Makio threw a powerful punch incorporating earth magic into the fish's body, then swam quickly to avoid it. Makio used wind magic to cover his legs, creating a strong current that pushed him deeper. However, the current stirred up the mud at the bottom, severely obstructing his vision. Not giving up, he continued to create a flow to sweep away the mud, hoping to find something interesting hidden under the ground. Finally, he decided to go to the surface to wait for the mud to settle. While preparing everything to dive again, Makio noticed the appearance of a strange woman standing nearby. She explained that she heard that someone lived in this area, so she was curious to stop by and take a look. However, as soon as she stepped into the water, a slime suddenly rushed out to attack her. As the woman struggled in the water, Makio decided that it would be easier to save her if she actually started to sink. And when that happened, he immediately jumped down and pulled her to shore. Unknowingly, he discovered that she had a strange femininity. Makio warns her that going to the evil land unprepared is tantamount to dooming herself to death. However, she resolutely entered because she heard that there were top-quality staffs here. Makio explains that those staffs are only sold at the outpost, but she earnestly begs him to sell them to her. Makio did not object, but insisted that she must have something of value in exchange, because he doesn't need money. She asked him to look inside her backpack. Makio rummaged around and found a history book about the area. She began to describe the contents of the book, which tells of islands floating in the air and monsters taller than mountains. This sounds like a fairy tale. But Cheru saw with her own eyes that it was all true. Makio offered to give the woman a staff for every 10 history books about the area she could bring. However, she only has one book now, and the rest will have to wait until the next time she comes back. This condition seemed quite unreasonable to her, because she did not know when she would be able to return here. After thinking, Makio told her to keep what he was about to reveal a secret. He removed Cheru's hood, revealing his demon horns. As expected, the woman appeared frightened. Makio immediately threatened her, forcing her to promise not to reveal what she had just seen. In fear, she hastily agreed. Makio then told Jennifer to check to see if there were any more items to trade, and asked Cheru to create some more wands. He asked the woman why she needed them, and she revealed that a rebellion was taking place in her homeland. Makio finds it interesting, because war is always an opportunity to make profit. Jennifer pulls Makio aside, sharing her suspicion that this woman is not who she claims to be. The quality of the items was too excellent to be just that of a merchant. Jennifer guessed that they were most likely stolen from a noble. However, she still felt that the woman's face was somewhat familiar. Thief or not, Makio is still willing to deal with her. The woman overheard them calling her a thief and immediately denied it. Makio asked her directly about the origin of these items. Finally, she admitted that she was an aristocrat from eastern Kenya, and that these items were given to her by her uncle to be traded. Jennifer explains that eastern Kenya is the closest kingdom to the land. The Devil's Land is often mistakenly considered part of eastern Kenya. Makio advised her to flee, but she firmly refused, saying that her people were not allowed to flee. Makio guessed that her uncle sent her here to protect her, but she didn't believe it. Even so, Makio still decided to exchange the magical staffs. After completing the transaction, he returned to investigating the ruins, but did not find anything interesting. The next day, Makio decided to stay home and read the books he had exchanged with the woman from eastern Kenya. The book tells about the past of the Demon Land, which was once a prosperous country but its people gradually disappeared in large numbers. The book also mentions floating islands swallowed by giant beasts, and deer are considered messengers of the gods. Makio could not help but worry when he learned that eastern Kenya often fell into rebellion. With war, this may not be as simple a conflict as he once thought. It seemed like something bigger was brewing. The next day, Makio went to the outpost to inform the guards about the rebellion. However, the captain said that this had nothing to do with them, because the rebellion would sooner or later be quelled. Makio decided to trust her captain's words and return home. On the way back, they were caught in a heavy rain. So heavy that Makio had never seen it before. When they returned, Jennifer had already begun implementing flood protection measures. However, at this rate, their crop fields will be completely destroyed. Makio rushed towards the fields, which were in a dangerous situation. He used magic to redirect the rainwater, saving the rice fields before they were completely flooded. However, when he returned home, the situation did not improve much. Although he prevented flooding in the field, the surrounding areas suffered more serious damage. This means they will have to import food for a while. The rain kept falling, and the next day it became even more intense. Makio considers using Peter's magic rings to set traps in search of food. He came up with the idea of placing an exploding magic circle under a wooden board and leaving it outside, waiting for an animal to accidentally step on it. The plan sounded good in his mind, until he heard a loud explosion. Jennifer and Cheru rushed in to call him out. When she stepped out, Makio was stunned to see a giant mountain appear, completely not there before. The strange thing is that the surrounding storm seems to be bending to submit to this mountain. However, the most bizarre thing was that the mountain began to move. Storms and gusts of wind tear apart everything in their path. The mountain itself seemed to be gathering the power of the storm, as if gathering it and using it for its own purposes. Makio realizes that this is the magical beast Peter described in his diary, a creature that appears every 3 months. Monsters like mist turtles, bears, and giant centipedes were swept away like tattered dolls. Those who survived the tornado were killed by lightning. Makio noticed several monsters fleeing to the north, part of their cave destroyed. Making a quick decision, he also chose the north direction as an escape route. The storm continued to roar endlessly, bringing destruction with it. He told Cheru to use an energy transfer spell on his legs, and told Jennifer not to let go no matter what happened. With increased strength, the group put all their strength into escaping the wrath of nature. Behind them, lightning continued to fall, destroying the unfortunate monsters in the path. The ground groaned, as if about to collapse under the brutal force of the storm. Finally, they reached the northern wasteland, but the situation here was no better. Monsters and demons everywhere were swept away or killed. Makio realizes that the wasteland is just a waste of time. Having no other choice, he decided to return to the forest to find another hiding place. While on the way back, one of Makio's steps slipped through the rotten planks covering the mouth of an old well, causing him to fall straight down in surprise. Makio rubbed her head, trying to regain her composure. He wondered where he was, in the well or in the ruins of a people who once lived here. He tried to step up, but his leg was broken and he couldn't move. Jennifer quickly went down to look around. The only luck is that they are still alive, and the whirlwind and heavy rain did not appear to have reached this place. Cheru looked down from above and then jumped down, carrying a pile of firewood. She used lightning magic to light a fire, creating a warm fire that helped relieve some of their worries. Even though she had entered this wasteland, Makio could still hear the monster's footsteps in the distance. Jennifer apologizes for being a burden all this time, but Makio consoles them that they are not out of danger yet. However, not long after, Makio collapsed from exhaustion. When he regained consciousness, he heard the sound of water falling from the sky. Cheru shook him awake. Jennifer used magic to heal the wound in his leg, allowing him to walk again. Cheru led him to a tunnel connected to the well. Makio followed them through the passage, wondering where this was. He shined his light ahead and discovered a cave covered with glowing mushrooms. The scene was mystical, but it also warned them not to eat anything here. After a while, they happened to find an underground lake, but the darkness was so thick that they couldn't see clearly. Cheru gave Makio a thunderstone, which she found on a nearby skeleton. A skeleton of a man is sitting nearby. Makio discovers a book wrapped around the skeleton's fingers. Jennifer recognized it as an old edition of Adventure Travel Guide. The book describes the Thunderstone as the key to the dungeon, and implores the reader not to lose it. The book also warns that if the key is stolen by a magical monster, it will bring doom to the entire world. Makio felt confused. Could a monster steal a dungeon? He looked at Jennifer and Cheru, both of whom thought this was impossible. Once the magical creature and the storm had passed, they began their journey back to the land of demons. Makio climbed out of the well, the storm passed and the giant monster disappeared. He lowered a rope so Cheru and Jennifer could climb up as well. Makio looked around and witnessed the devastation the storm left behind. Trees were shattered, dead monsters were scattered throughout the forest. Cheru complained of hunger. Makio suddenly realized that she hadn't eaten anything since yesterday. However, he didn't want to eat dead monsters. So he asked Cheru to eat some seeds and endure the hunger for the time being. They returned to their shelter, but when they arrived, they found it completely destroyed. Inside, everything was destroyed and their food sources were also destroyed. Jennifer urged them to quickly make the place habitable. After an afternoon of cleaning, they finally created enough space to sleep comfortably. Cheru almost immediately fell asleep, and not long after, Jennifer fell asleep too. Makio wanted to take a bath, but as soon as he was about to do so, he quickly fell asleep. However, a strange feeling woke him up, something stirred in his pants. He reached in and took out a small coin. It was the same coin that Jennifer had given him when she first arrived. The coin slipped from Makio's hand and rolled away. He hurriedly chased after the precious coin. And at last he went outside the cave again. The money didn't stop there. It continued to slip out of his hand, rolling away deep into the forest, until falling to the edge of a swamp. Makio tried one last time to catch the coin, but it slipped from his hand and fell into the muddy swamp. He dipped his hand in the water and finally got the coin back. But as he withdrew his hand, a strange woman emerged from the water. The woman did not pay attention to Makio. She turned around, hovered above the water for a bit and then disappeared. The next day, Makio told the two girls that he had seen a ghost. Cheru didn't believe it and found it very funny, but Jennifer looked more serious. She asked Makio if he did something to make the ghost angry. Anyway, Jennifer reassures Makio that the problem can be easily solved if he sprinkles the ghost with some holy water. As a nun, Jennifer has the ability to create holy water. She prepared a small jar of spiced water and consecrated it with her magic. Just a few minutes later, Jennifer gave Makio a jar of holy water. Makio completely believes that Jennifer is a real nun. He placed the coin in water to purify it. They spent the rest of the day working hard, renovating their house. However, much of their food was destroyed in the storm, and replacing it was not easy. Jennifer led Makio to the armory and showed him that Peter's belongings didn't have a single scratch on them. She speculates that these weapons and armor are made from adamantite, an extremely durable and valuable material. Its effects are so powerful, it is said that it can turn friends against each other. However, Makio saw no signs that Peter had ever worked with someone else. Cheru again called his attention to a part of the floor destroyed in the storm. Underneath the rubble was a strange magic circle, emitting a dim light. He felt this could be dangerous and hurriedly pushed Jennifer and Cheru out of the room. That evening, Makio was alarmed when she saw the coin in the holy water jar begin to move vigorously. Jennifer's blessing had no effect. Makio wondered if the coin was trying to call the elf ghost again. He decided to end this once and for all. He took the flask of holy water with him and entered the forest, heading towards the swamp. He entered a deeper area than before, and when he stepped on a pile of dry leaves, he heard groaning under it. Makio jumped back, and to make sure he had stepped on someone, he stepped on them again. After confirming that there was indeed someone down there, he cleaned up the pile of dry leaves and discovered the woman he had met yesterday. She is not a ghost, but a real creature, with flesh and bones. The elf quietly asked Makio for help. Makio noticed that the coin had stopped moving, so he gave the elf holy water to drink. The elf gradually recovered her strength and stood up, equal to Makio's height. The elf made a throat-clearing motion and introduced herself as Helgen Tulong. Comes from the kingdom of the elves. She asked Makio to call her Helgen. Makio introduces himself as the lord of this area and invites her to return to his home to recover. Helgen happily accepted. She explains that she was buried in rubble during the storm and tried to call for help using astral projection, but was unsuccessful. Luckily, Makio found her. Makio felt braver knowing that she hadn't seen a ghost. He helped Helgen up and helped her walk. However, he noticed strange cuts on her shoulders, along with a strange mark. That is the mark of a slave. Helgen denies that she is a slave. She was just about to be condemned for a crime that would enslave her. She was detained simply because she tried to stop a war by protesting against her superiors. Makio doesn't believe her words and still considers it a crime. Helgen insists that she just ran away from her hometown and promises not to cause trouble. She begs Makio to protect her during this time. Makio asks if she can pay the rent. He leads her back to the cave and introduces her to Jennifer and Cheru. Immediately, Cheru and Helgen took a dislike to each other, creating a tense atmosphere. Makio feels frustrated because she has another roommate. But at that time, he had no idea how much trouble Helgen would bring. The next morning, Makio was disappointed that breakfast only consisted of plain bread, mushrooms, and sorted herbs. The food problem remains unresolved, and Jennifer proposes returning to the outpost to barter for some food. Makio asks what they should bring. Jennifer suggests making wands, trading monster pelts, or making potions. She knew a little about making medicine, But Cheru pointed out that they could make elf medicine. Helgen proudly stood up and promised to make as much elf medicine as he could, to pay the rent. She immediately left the cave to start gathering ingredients. However, she did not listen to Makio and was not careful. As a result, she was attacked by anesthetic scorpions. Makio quickly took them off her and checked to see if she was still alive. He then gathered everyone together and planned a kokiza to gather the ingredients needed to make Helgen's elf medicine and some wands. While Jennifer and Helgen stay behind to make the potion, Makio takes Cheru with her to gather ingredients to make a wand. Makio and Cheru returned in the evening, carrying some valuable materials, including arachne spider silk. Jennifer and Helgen had also prepared some elf medicine for exchange. Makio reiterates that as long as Helgen can pay the rent with her job, she can stay. After preparing all the items, Makio took Cheru to the outpost. This time his target is food and some construction tools. However, upon arriving at the outpost, Makio felt something was wrong. A large group of soldiers were gathered around a woman, who was fighting one of their own. The captain welcomes Makio and explains that they are suppressing some rebellious slaves. He asked Makio if he had come to discuss the war, but Makio replied that he had only come to trade. Makio gave the arachne spider silk to the captain, who happily agreed to trade it for food and construction tools, just what Makio needed. However, before trading, the captain wanted to inform Makio about the situation in his territory. He refreshes Makio's memories of the recent civil war, and Makio shares about his encounter with the woman from eastern Kenya who bought weapons from him. The captain explained the delicate territorial situation, including the elves' decision to intervene in the war. During the war, the elves invaded eastern Kenya, under the pretext of taking back their ancestral lands. Makio recalls that Helgen tried to stop the fight. However, the people of eastern Kenya easily repelled the elven invaders. Mainly thanks to the efforts of explorers and slaves who rebelled. So the nobles lost a lot of prestige. Even though they are still ruling eastern Kenya. However, their position becomes increasingly dangerous. What worried the captain was that the nobles had taken notice of Makio's territory and the great power his wands possessed. Makio took out the certificate of ownership of her territory, but the captain announced that this was not strong enough evidence to assert ownership of the area. He needed the Estonian royal seal to strengthen his control. Monster territory has long been considered a gray area, overlooked. The royal army is technically on Makio's side, but eastern Kenya remains part of Estonian territory. Unless the uprisings were directed against them, they would not rush to intervene. The captain simply warned Makio that someone was targeting his land. Makio thanked the captain for his advice, and the captain also gave him permission to chase the intruders out of his territory. He promised to take care of the necessary documents for Makio to consolidate his ownership of the territory. The captain led Makio out and as a parting gift, he gave Makio a slave, who had been sent to them by the new warlord of eastern Kenya. The captain admitted that having a woman in a training facility full of men was troublesome. Makio was initially unhappy with this, but upon closer inspection, he realized that this woman was the same noble who had bought the wand from him a few weeks ago. Cheru advises Makio to accept the captain's gift, as they will need all the help they can get to restore the monster territory. Before the nobles can expose Cheru as a monster. Makio lightly hit Cheru on the back of the head, pulling her home. When they arrived, Jennifer and Helgen were there to greet them. Helgen curiously asked about the girl on Makio's back, and he explained that she was a slave. The girl opened her eyes and stared at Helgen, then suddenly attacked her. Makio immediately intervened and pushed the two away from each other. He ordered them to treat the slaves together amicably. But both refused to be slaves. Makio sternly reminds them again that they must work hard, or they will be sent away. The next morning, Makio encountered Helgen and Sylvia, asking Jennifer to add some seasoning to the stew. This was a good sign that they were starting to get along, at least in Makio's mind. Today, their goal is to collect food and ingredients. Makio watched as Sylvia, the new slave, could easily stand her ground against the giant ogres with ease. In contrast, Helgen has difficulty even facing the most gentle haze turtles. Cheru is forced to intervene and save Helgen from the risk of becoming a fresh salad. Makio took advantage of this opportunity to destroy the turtle, accidentally bathing Sylvia in its blood. Makio apologizes and asks Cheru to take Sylvia to the bathroom. Helgen, also covered in blood, decided to join them. Meanwhile, Makio took advantage of this time to prepare turtle soup. However, not long after, a panicked Cheru informed Makio of something disturbing. She led him to a horse that had been killed, its intestines scattered on the ground. Jennifer spotted 2 other horses nearby, and they all had saddles. Other remaining items include a bag, several weapons and bloodstains. Makio discovers a letter in one of the bags and becomes worried by its contents. Helgen alerts Makio to the presence of a Vespa hive nearby, leading him to conclude that the horsemen had been turned into bee food. He thought there was no hope for them to be cured and ordered everyone to go back. He noticed that Helgen seemed to be covered in strange tattoos. She admits she is cursed, and these tattoos limit her powers, making her unable to use magic. Makio doesn't mind much as long as she can continue making medicine for him. Helgen was surprised that he wasn't worried about his curse. But Cheru points out that she is also cursed, and Sylvia adds that she also cannot use much magic, only knows 2 spells and both involve enhancing combat power. Makio felt strangely reassured by their conversation. He crumpled the paper, threw it aside, and chased after them. The paper slowly opened, revealing a request to leave the territory immediately. Helgen woke up, startling Makio. She announced that Cheru taught her to use the sap of the yasi tree to make a potion. Makio told her that clay jars might be better because they harden faster. Helgen leaves, and Makio feels uncomfortable because that was the only reason she woke him up. However, Helgen said she and Cheru saw something strange in the western stream. It's a zombie? Hope it's not a clicker. Makio, Helgen, Sylvia, and Jennifer approach the stream, where Cheru is watching over a zombie. The zombie, missing its lower body, was crawling on the rocky ground. Makio didn't find it scary and suggested burning it. However, Jennifer realizes this is the zombie she defeated before. Is also where she found the gold coin. Makio orders Cheru to burn the zombies to prevent the spread of the virus. Helgen asked Makio about the coin's specialness, and upon learning that it led him to her, she suddenly exclaimed that this undead could be a dead elven adventurer. However, the facial disfigurement and lack of time traces make this difficult to verify. It is possible that this is a predecessor of Helgen, who came here first. She took the gold coin and examined it carefully. Concluded that it was a real coin from the city of Midgard, Kingdom of Yggdrasil. Everyone in Yggdrasil, from children to the elderly, can use magic. This kingdom once traded widely with the country of the elven people. But the relevant records have long been lost. Sylvia recalled that she had read about this in a history book. Helgen immediately asked her where that book was. And Makio offers to go get it back. Makio and Helgen look through the history book, which records the past of the demon territory. He also showed her Peter's notes, especially the last page, where he wrote about his regret for not being able to discover the mystery behind this land. Makio reveals that he found the book from the body of the person who was in this cave. But he and Cheru discovered Peter's grave on the floating island. Helgen found this very strange. Why is Peter's grave on a floating island? But his diary ended up in the hands of a stranger in a cave? Makio also thinks so. He pointed to the last page again and pointed out that the writing on that page was better than the previous pages. This indicates that Peter's diary was written by 2 authors. Makio believes that this possibility is very high. It seems like neither of those 2 can solve the mystery of the demon land. And when Helgen's predecessor was added, there were 3 people involved. Helgen speculates that perhaps the former demon lands were where the Yggdrasil kingdom existed. Although the texts describe them as messengers of the gods, Cheru notes that such monsters are considered messengers of evil among the monster world. The deeper the mystery became, the more questions they had but no answers. Helgen declares that she will stay here until she solves this mystery herself. Jennifer admitted that she was also starting to feel curious about it, and so was Sylvia. As the landowner, Makio warned that he would evict anyone who tried to take the treasure in those ruins. The mystery remains unsolved, and they return to their daily routine. Sylvia asked Makio if she could make weapons and armor from monster materials, and he encouraged her to try. Sylvia successfully created an impressive armor even though it was her first time doing so. She becomes the group's official blacksmith. Sylvia asked Makio to teach her how to fight, but he can only teach some basic survival skills. She had no problem as long as it helped her become stronger. Makio instructs Sylvia to fight a wild bear, but she has difficulty doing any real damage to it. Makio retracts her previous comment about her fighting ability, advising her to observe her weaknesses more closely. If her attacks are ineffective, she should immediately look for another angle of attack. Makio learned fighting through small courses at the guild, and the rest by surviving in the monster land. Sylvia finds it hard to believe because Makio fights so well. Makio has an extremely good sense of observation, and as the main character, he knows what to do. He also taught Sylvia how to examine the bodies of slain enemies to better understand their strengths and weaknesses. To prove it, Makio took a random fruit and tested it to see if it was poisonous by applying it to his skin. Meanwhile, Jennifer ate immediately and almost burned her tongue. This is just another survival lesson. A few days later, as the group recovered from an expedition, they heard a scream echoing from the western river. Makio takes Cheru with him and orders everyone else to stay in the cave. When they arrived, they discovered several men had been washed ashore, presumably killed by the slimes. They noticed that these people had strange and identical tattoos on their bodies in many different positions. Chiru speculates that their land may be under attack. Makio couldn't ask the dead if they attacked his land. They continued looking for someone to ask, but the next person they discovered was also dead. If left, these corpses can turn into zombies. Makio wants to stop that by taking them to the captain. But first, he wanted to show the rest of these bodies. Sylvia immediately recognized the tattoo, saying these people were assassins. In the church, they are known by the evil name 16 Hussies. Sylvia's father once warned her that if she met anyone with a crescent moon and cross tattooed, she must immediately leave home and run away. However, they have only discovered a few bodies, and others may still be somewhere in the area. Helgen asks why assassins appeared here, but there is no shortage of possible targets. Every single one of them is a suspect. Makio decides to report this to the captain and hopes he can handle it. He made his way to the outpost alone and presented the body to the captain. The captain was clearly stressed. He suggested that he would handle the body immediately and planned to talk to his superiors to receive further instructions. Makio doesn't care about learning about the assassins, he's just worried that their accomplices might return. The fact that someone is invading his monster land makes Makio worried. The captain has an important announcement. The official papers confirming Makio as the owner of the monster territory will arrive in 3 days. This officially turns Makio into a true aristocrat. Makio was surprised, but this was understandable. Because his territory is too large. However, this announcement resulted in a further report by the captain. There was a high possibility that soldiers and adventurers from eastern Kenya would infiltrate Makio's territory. Until Makio officially becomes the owner of this land, the Estonian army cannot legally intervene. Makio will have to defend his territory on his own until his ownership certificate is issued. The captain cannot assist, and he believes in Makio's ability to create a miracle. Makio asks the captain how many soldiers will attack him. The captain estimated that between 1,000 and 2,000 people could infiltrate. Makio saw no way he could keep his land with just a motley crew of people. If eastern Kenya takes over the monster territory and consolidates their power, they will most likely enter an all-out war with the elves. Makio doesn't care about these political issues, he just wants to keep his land and drive the Kenyans out of his land. He promised to do his best to maintain his position. Makio conveys the situation to his team. To make up for the difference in numbers, they would have to rely on traps and tricks to deal with an army of 2,000 men. Cheru eagerly awaits the fight. Sylvia worries about her chances of a rematch, and Jennifer and Helgen were a little annoyed at having to go through all this trouble. Makio directed everyone to start making traps. While digging holes in the ground, Helgen complains that they look like they just stepped out of the Stone Age. Surely there must be an easier way than digging the hole yourself. Cheru suggests that Makio should use magic to create the holes, but he refuses. Cheru didn't understand why he didn't want to do that. He was reluctant, so he had to do it. He caused a part of the ground to break apart immediately. Jennifer and Sylvia had never seen magic like that before. Makio claims that he does not use magic, only interferes with the land with magic. Cheru points out that it is indeed magic. Girls immediately started paying attention to him. Helgen commented that Makio was using magic using only her imagination. While Cheru found that he completely ignored elements such as structure or theory. Normally, one must learn magic through practicing spells. Makio explains that he has no talent in using magic. The elders in his village said so. Because Makio can use magic without a spell, all 4 girls call him strange. However, no matter how odd Makio is, the reality is that they can use his powers to their advantage. Helgen suggested that Makio create a maze with his magic, but she thought even a simple hill would be enough to slow down the army's advance. If they skillfully form a series of hills, they can lead invaders into the exact area they want, and then arrange traps in the valleys. Makio feels that this plan is actually feasible. He asked if anyone had any other ideas, and Sylvia proposes to trick the monster into the enemy's path. Meanwhile, Cheru suggests using a magic circle to slow them down. She has mastered the magic rings she found in Peter's notebook. Jennifer points out that a large army eventually has to camp, which means they have a great opportunity to poison their enemy's food. Helgen adds that the mud flowers she planted for her medicines are about to bloom, so they can use them. They can also make cylinders filled with flammable materials to make homemade gasoline bombs. Makio begins to believe that they actually have a chance of winning. He assigned tasks to the team and they got to work. Each labors tirelessly on his duty, and the greatest campaign the Weird Lands have ever seen is about to begin. After completing all preparations, they took some time to rest and eat. However, not long after, Helgen's sharp ears heard the sound of war drums in the distance. Makio is certain that the army is being encouraged to fight. Jennifer remains skeptical that 2,000 people could get into this area. But Makio directed her and everyone to move to higher ground. Currently, Makio and his team set up camp on a nearby hill, but an hour passed, and the army still did not get closer to them. However, Helgen still heard the sound of steel clashing and screams. Maybe the army is facing monsters. The jungle terrain made it difficult for them to advance, and given the situation, the army would likely be destroyed before reaching their hiding place. Cheru and Jennifer returned to the cave, while Makio, Sylvia, and Helgen remained behind. But when nothing happened, they decided to go back too. Sylvia recalls how East Kenya was taken over by explorers and rebels, with betrayal from within. Helgen wondered if there were any traitors in their group. But she concluded that they were all too stupid to be traitors. Makio reveals that after the battle, he will probably become a noble. However, Helgen and Cheru were both against the idea, as they worried he would align himself with people who were untrustworthy and without integrity. Makio asked if anyone in the group had ever been a noble, and he was surprised that Jennifer was the only one who had not been a noble. Jennifer feels self-conscious and highlights her inferiority complex. Makio asked them what the responsibilities of a noble were, but received vague, confused, and contradictory answers. Deciding to learn more on her own, Makio began independent research. With no signs that the enemy would attack at night, Makio and his group took turns keeping guard. However, the next morning, they wake up to the sound of Cheru's magic ring exploding. Makio and Sylvia rushed to the place where the explosion came from, but found only one wild boar caught in a trap. He ordered the wild boar to be cleared away so as not to attract more monsters to the area, to avoid wasting their traps. Suddenly, Cheru appeared next to them and looked towards the horizon. She pointed toward the stream, where on the other side of the river, the East Kenya army was advancing, step by determined step. The soldiers began using axes to cut down trees. It seemed they intended to use them as pontoon bridges, to ferry troops across the river. Jennifer and Helgen brought bacon and some nuts to replenish the group's strength. They will need them. Makio decides to wait and observe the situation, but he tasks Cheru with preparing a barbecue to attract monsters to their area. Eastern Kenya soldiers set up a bridge and cross the river into Devil's territory. However, crossing the river is extremely dangerous. Many people are pulled into the water by slimes and drown. The land inside is also not safe. The soldiers are harassed by big-nosed monkeys and flying monsters, causing the morale of the army to decline. Still, they advanced, until they entered a valley created by the artificial hills of Makio. Here, dozens of people fell into the trap. The rest were devoured by man-eating plants, dissolved in the liquid of giant rafflesia trees, or stung to death by Vespa bees. The army's morale dropped, and the commander ordered his men to stand down so he could burn down all threats. Makio realizes that the army commander is a wizard. If we can kill him, this invasion can end soon. Helgen aimed his bow at the wizard and shot an arrow that hit him while he was busy reciting the spell. Makio praises Helgen, but she mumbles that she failed. The soldiers immediately formed a barrier in front of the wizard to protect him from further attacks. The wizard retreated to the other side of the river and ordered the army to continue advancing. A soldier mocks the wizard about his leadership abilities. A group of adventurers crossed the pontoon bridge and entered demon territory. Sylvia saw them from her observation position. The faces of the adventurers were unmistakable, and she realized that the main army of rebels had arrived.